Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back with another live show where I sometimes butcher your names and attempt to answer your automotive questions. Hey, it's what I do. A few things before we get started to talk a little bit about where I take the questions and where we go. First of all, I will be taking the questions from the Google Plus event over on my Google Plus page. There's been links posted all over my social networks. Hopefully you'll be able to find your way there if you wish to ask a question this evening. The show will last for half hour-ish. I usually run over. I try to answer as many questions as I can. However, if you're watching this on YouTube and posting comments and questions in those comments, I cannot see those. So therefore, I will not be answering the comments posted to the YouTube video. Apologies in advance. What else will I not be doing? I will be answering your questions posted to Google+. EricTheCarGuy.com is always available for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. So if you have automotive questions, I don't get to it during this program. I would ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. We have resources there, such as an FAQ page that covers many of the questions I get asked. Also, we have an active forum where I go and answer questions there. So we have all those other options besides this. But we are here to answer your questions. So I am going to start pulling those up. And usually I start at the bottom, work my way to the top, and then we get random towards the end. Oh, and if I don't get to your question today, the next show I believe will be February 3rd. All right. Remember I said I sometimes butcher your names. Adamia Jaden. Okay. Sup, Eric? I have a small question. I put a kill switch on the fuel pump, and now it's running all the time. Once I turn the key, is that a bad thing? Thanks in advance. Gino, please. It's a 94 Honda Civic hatchback with a B18C1 motor in it. Okay, I say you have your kill switch wired up wrong. If I were to wire up a kill switch on a Honda, I'd try to cut the power feed to the fuel pump. I believe out of the main relay, it's the yellow wire coming out of the main relay. So I'd put my switch in there. So that way I could just bypass, or I could just open that circuit, and that way you would have technically a kill switch, or you close the circuit and then the kill switch would work. That way you're not interfering with the operation. You don't want the fuel pump running all the time. In fact, it's on a timer. When you first turn the key, it runs for about 3 to 5 seconds and then turns off if it doesn't sense that the engine is running. So you don't want it to run all the time. It's not a good thing. So I would wire it up differently. And like I said, I think you can interrupt that yellow wire going back to the fuel pump. Just check the wiring diagram. I'm just pulling this out of my head, whether or not it's the yellow wire that powers up the fuel pump, but I think it is. So that's the wire I would choose, and that's the one I would interrupt for the kill switch. Good luck with that. Michael Stackinson, yesterday I replaced the front washer fluid tube on my 2014 CRV as mice had gotten inside the hood padding and chewed it up. I was not happy about this, but so far all is good now. In all my years of owning vehicles, I've never had a car that has been subject to animal intrusion in such a short length of time. Unfortunately, the vehicle is parked outside. I do not have an extra garage to put the vehicle in. My question for you is, should I be concerned about anything else being compromised due to animal intrusion? Absolutely. I have seen it several times. I've seen a lot of things involving animals and vehicles, and a lot of them weren't so pretty, but mice, yeah, they're the worst. They got a taste for insulation on wires. And in fact, I think they're actually trying to engineer wires. I think it's, there's like ethylene or something like that, something in the plastic that they use for the insulation on wires that is attractive to animals, particularly mice. That's why they chew on it. And I believe they were trying to engineer some new type of wiring that animals would not want to chew on. Mice are the worst, especially usually I find like you have mice and things if you have like pets, especially dogs. I find like a lot of, I've found air boxes literally filled with dog food before because they were just hoarding it up in there. I haven't tried it, but I hear tell that mothballs are a good deterrent because apparently that smell repels them. So you might want to try putting some mothballs maybe in your glove box, especially because mice will get up in the HVAC next. So if they've gotten the hood insulation, the next place they want to go, there's a lot of insulation and stuff up underneath your dash. I usually find them in the HVAC. So I would put it like maybe some mothballs or whatever in something that the smell can get out, but the mothballs won't roll around inside like your glove box, and that may help deter them. As far as under your hood, you might try the same thing. I would go on a search on the internet. I'm sure there's something out there, but that's just what I've heard. Some way to keep those animals out of there. But mice, man, they can wreak havoc. For little creatures, they can take down big vehicles. Just saying. But good luck with that. That is one of those kind of problems. It's a kick in the nuts for sure. Wade Ferding. Happy Wednesday. I have an 88 Dodge D350 5.9 liter 4-barrel. I have replaced every component that I know of. What, for BBL? I'm confused. All right, it's an 88. I've replaced every component that I know of on the ignition, and yet I will be driving down the road and the engine will just shut down. Usually it will start right back up, but sometimes it takes a while. Any ideas? Second question, if you have time, my fuel tank is cracked. I resealed it, but I would like to replace it as it's plastic and old. Any suggestions that aren't custom and cost more than a rolling toolbox is worth? Thanks in advance. I do enjoy your videos. All right, now as far as it shutting down, you say you replaced everything on the ignition switch. Okay, so we'll rule out that, or everything in the ignition circuit. We'll rule out that for now, but really what you have to do is you have to make the determination of what's going away. Now, if this really is indeed carbureted, it's an 88, so I suppose it's possible. If it is indeed carbureted, it's weird that, well, it could be a fuel delivery issue. It could be something with that carburetor not working properly. I mean, that's definitely an older vehicle, and if the carburetor's never been serviced, they need to be serviced once in a while. I've done a couple of videos on carburetor rebuilds that you might find helpful, or you might find a place that could rebuild the carburetor for you. That could be an issue, especially if it has been serviced or adjusted or cleaned or any of that kind of stuff. Carburetors require maintenance. I mean, they do the same thing as fuel injection, just they do it mechanically instead of electronically. So they tend to require periodic maintenance. I mean, electronic components, they most of the time either work or they don't, but old mechanical stuff needs servicing, and carburetors in particular need periodic servicing. And carbureted engines really like a fresh carburetor on there, like good metered fuel. They love it. They run really, really well, especially after you get it all done, you get it on there, you get it all tuned right. It's an art form. It's a dying art form because, you know, it's just not there. Now we got those kids poking those newfangled scan tools to tune things up. Before we used to have screwdrivers and wrenches. But don't rule out the fuel system. And as far as the ignition system goes, you need to make that determination if that's what's gone away. So it could be something like that. And I'm not sure if in 88 they were still using ballast resistors, but ballast resistors were a big problem. I don't think they would on an 88. I would think that it would have maybe some form of electronic ignition on them. And that being the case, I'm just not familiar with that vehicle. So I wish I had more information for you, but Sparker Fuel is where I'd be looking. Especially fuel with the carburetor. You say it's weird to start up. Yeah, that's where I'd be looking. Okay, Shavarin Runo. It's okay. You can make fun of my name. You can call me EricTheCarGuy, or I don't know. Whatever. Arose by any other name. Hey, Eric, I recently purchased 3M brake lube and 3M silicone paste to service my disc brakes after watching your disc brake service video. Is there an expiration date on the product, or do they last forever until you use them all? I've had some that I've had for years, and I haven't had an issue. You know, in the cold, it gets kind of, you know, it doesn't flow as well. But other than that, I haven't known it really. I've had some cans for years, and they've been fine. So you should be good. Andre. Hey, Eric, Andrew again, bought the 2003 Honda CRV illuminating the light that are not working on my climate control. Just so you know, I didn't cut into any of the harness, and I check all the fuse and replace the bulb in the climate control, and still nothing. I also replaced the aftermarket radio with a factory one that came with the car, and when I turn the headlights on, the light on the radio goes out, and when I turn it off, the light on the radio come on. I don't care about the factory radio because I'm not using it. I was just wanting to have an idea of what's going on. All I care about is the climate control because it's dangerous to drive at night and looking down and when you're trying to change things. Any more suggestions that I could do? Thanks in advance. I think I remember this. I think you had installed an aftermarket radio and your climate control illumination wasn't working properly. I think that's what I'm gathering. And you tried some of the suggestions I gave you in the last show. So from what I'm hearing from you, there's still an issue. And you're also saying you didn't tie into that wiring. I'm saying that if it worked before you installed the radio, then it's something with the radio. or something with the installation. You can't rule yourself out as a possible cause of this. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying I do this to myself sometimes too. I have to put myself in check and say, okay, what did I change? What did I do differently that possibly caused it not to work now when it was working before? As far as that illumination, it's all connected. The radio illumination, the climate control illumination. If there's some different type of wiring inside the radio, it may be something in the radio. It may not be something that you wired up or did at all. So it may not have anything to do with you. It may just be when you plug that in, the illumination circuit goes through that radio, and in such a way it takes out your climate control illumination. Because when you turn on your headlight switch, there's other illumination circuits that come into play, such as the stuff in your dash and your instrument cluster, and also your climate control, as you know, and with your radio, and then any number of other things inside the vehicle. I mean, I've even seen steering wheel controls and such light up. So, you know, they're all connected, and you have to find out basically where that connection is breaking down. Unfortunately, I don't possess the knowledge off the top of my head to tell you exactly what to look for. You got to find a wiring diagram. You got to find out how that circuit works. You got to find out what happens when you turn that switch to turn the headlights on. You got to find out what causes the illumination, what wires to look at, who are the suspects in this case. I'll post the link in the description to what I've got about electrical diagnosis, and it goes over some information on how to read wiring diagrams so you can figure this stuff out. I can say this: the best wiring Honda makes really good wiring diagrams. In 2003, they were electronic at that point, I believe. Well, maybe that was like during crossover. So you might be able to find a book. The book you're looking for is called an ETM. It's an electrical troubleshooting manual. Like I said, the ones from Honda are great because not only do they give you accurate information, which is so hard to find with wiring diagrams, they also give you pictures and component locations, like big arrows saying, this is where this component is. This is where this connector is. It's super handy. And I've even done a video on that, and I'll link that down in the description. I probably should have said earlier for the rest of you watching that any of the videos or links that I discuss in this video will be down in the description. So please head down there to check those out. But good luck with that, Andrew. It's like I said, a wiring diagram is going to be your best friend. You're just going to have to find out where that illumination circuit comes from and where you're losing that. So a test light and a good wiring diagram will take you far in this situation. At least I believe it will. Well, yeah. A good impedance test light, one that can do digital circuits. That way it won't blow anything up on you. Or better yet, a DVOM. I often use a power probe. So there's that. Justin Hosey. There I go again. At least I got the Justin right. Hey, Eric, I have an 06 Dodge Hemi Magnum. I recently noticed that I had heat only when driving, and I also noticed that the coolant is low. Topped it off, and all is good now. Since then, I've been having to top it off every few days. No noticeable area where there's a leak. No stains, wet spots, or stuck on dirt. System has been bled, but still losing coolant somewhere. No sweet smells inside, no white exhaust, no water in the oil. There are several. It sounds like you have a coolant leak. However, I can't rule this out because I have people come to me with this quote unquote problem. They look at their overflow. They see that it gets low every few 1,000 miles or whatever, and they think they have a coolant leak. You have to keep in mind 50% of your coolant should be water. Water will evaporate as it gets hot. So especially when it gets really hot. So normally your coolant will get low over time. In fact, I recommend checking it every time the oil is changed and topping it off in the overflow. Everything should be fine. That's how I do it, and I don't have any issues with it. But to find leaks, I have a video on this. I also have an entire article I've written on this. Pressure test the system. You basically remove the radiator cap and pump pressure into the system with a special tool. You may be able to rent one for free at the auto parts store. Honestly, they're not that expensive. But anyway, you pressurize the system and you look around for leaks. You look around for drips. If you don't see it, well, actually you want to see if the system holds pressure. And be careful with this because sometimes you can be fooled by the tool if it's not sealing properly. Sometimes it leaks where the tool connects to the radiator. And that can look like a leak. But anyway, assuming the tool is working and you see the pressure dropping over time, and as far as how much pressure to put in, on the top of your radiator cap that usually states how much pressure is in the system. It's usually 15 or so pounds, something around there, or 1 bar for those of you that use that as system. Anyway, you put that you put that amount of pressure in the system, and if the pressure does not drop, it's not likely you have a leak somewhere. And then it could possibly be what I described earlier, the water's just evaporating. or if there is a leak that you can't necessarily see, I'm trying to think, maybe dye or something. It's the cooling system leaks, except for when they're inside the dash, like say in the heater core. That can be difficult to nail down. And a lot of times if you have a leak at the heater core, when you turn on the defroster, the inside of the windshield gets this weird yucky film on it, and often associated with that sweet smell, which you say you don't have. Outside of that, as far as a potential head gasket issue, that's a different test. I use a chemical test. You put a chemical inside of a tube and you draw the air from the cooling system up through this, and it changes color if it senses the presence of combustion gases, which would tell you if you have a combustion leak into the cooling system. I always say that. Yeah, at 99% of the time it's a head gasket, but there's that other 1% where it's a cracked head or a cracked block. So I'm always hesitant to say, yeah, you got a bad head gasket if I find combustion gases in the coolant. I have videos on all of this. Once again, I also have, there'll also be linked in the description, link to engine overheats is the one you're looking for. And I have videos covering both tests that I just described within that, that you can check out along with additional information. So that's where I go with that. Steve Z, hey, I can pronounce that one. 96 Ford Thunderbird, 4.6 liter engine, 103,000 miles. During quick acceleration or when the car is going up a hill, the engine develops a loud pinging sound. Since the car is only driven short distances in the city, I believe the problem might be carbon buildup on the pistons. I thought about trying the steam cleaning method I saw in one of your videos where you put water mist in the vacuum system of your engine, but I'm hesitant in doing that on this EFI engine. Is there another way to clean carbon off pistons? How about pouring some type of cleaner directly into the combustion chamber via spark plug hole? Would cleaners like Steve Foam, Marvel's Mystery Oil, or fuel cleaners work by pouring them directly into the combustion chamber and letting them sit for 24 to 48 hours before starting the engine again? Thanks. Never do that. Never put fluids in the combustion chamber unless there's some way to get them out, because if you put too much in there and you go to start the engine, hydrostatic lock, that's what bends connecting rods. When people drive through deep puddles or something like that, suck water up into the engine, same effect. And water in the engine bends connecting rods, sometimes breaks them. Liquid is not compressible, so I do not recommend that you do it that way. Those cleaners aren't designed to be used that way anyway. Aside from that, you're kind of making an assumption on what's causing the pinging. And I would look into possibly the EGR causing a problem. I would also look into the fact you say you don't drive it much. Your gas may be old. Also, if it requires premium gasoline and you're only using regular gasoline, that could also play a factor. However, the NOx sensor should pick up on that and do something about that. It's a 96, so those systems were a bit slower than the ones we have today. But typically, it could also be a timing issue. So there's any number of things that could cause that ping noise. But mostly the EGR system is there to cool the combustion chamber under load to help prevent this and also prevent NOx emissions. So therefore, there could be a problem with the EGR. And I'm not saying necessarily clogged passages. Older EGR systems like that were normally vacuum controlled. And one quick test that I often use on those older systems is vacuum operated EGR valves is while the engine is just sitting there at idle, I either put a vacuum pump onto the EGR valve itself and pump it up to activate it to see if the engine starts to run rough or stall. If it does, I know the EGR system is working properly. If it doesn't, then I know it isn't. Sometimes just a quick check, I can actually reach my fingers through inside the EGR valve and pull up on it without applying vacuum just to see if that part of the system is working. Now, just because it stalls when you apply vacuum to it does not mean that the things that control the vacuum going to that EGR valve are working properly. That's the next step. And you'd have to look at the information specific to your vehicle to find out if that's the case. As far as squirting water into a fuel-injected engine as opposed to a carbureted engine, in that video you spoke of, it was a carbureted engine. It was just easy for me to do it that way. But the only difference between a carbureted engine and a fuel-injected engine is one's carbureted and one's fuel-injected. Everything below the fuel system is virtually the same. It's still the same engine. And for a fuel-injected engine, I'd just get a squirt bottle, fill it up with water, and squirt it into the intake. The idea here, once again, is you don't want to do too much. You want it to be able to atomize before it gets into the combustion chamber, and that's what breaks up the carbon. So as far as doing that, you don't have to worry about it. And you can, like I say, just use a squirt bottle and see if you can squirt it down to the intake. And don't dump copious amounts in there, just a little bit at a time. while you're revving the engine up, and that should heat it up enough to turn into steam, which is what breaks up the carbon. It's a really simple, easy thing. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. But if you strike out there, once again, check the fuel, and also check to see if the EGR is operating properly. Adam Pittman, I hope you're having a great day. I am, actually, not bad. I hope you are too. I'll be replacing my valve cover gasket on my 2000 Tiburon, and I was wondering if you had any tricks or tips for me. It's my first time doing it. This way I do it right and do not mess anything up. Thanks again, Andy. Oh, also, if possible, is it possible for an ECT sensor to cause some minor transmission problems? All right, first, as far as the valve cover goes, my recommendation, I would recommend OE gaskets. They fit better than some of the aftermarket ones, and I say that because, and the other thing is don't goop RTV everywhere. When you take it off, when it comes from the factory, you don't see them gooping RTV everywhere. There's a reason for that. Don't do it. Maybe just a little bit of gasket adhesive or something to get it to stay in place. But that's about it. Don't goop it up with all that stuff. That's not pro. Okay. Other than that, that's valve cover gasket replacement is kind of fun. It depends on the vehicle. Sometimes they're buried under stuff, but yours I don't think is buried too badly, so you should be okay. But just make sure everything lines up when you put it all back together, and just take your time, have fun with it. The inside of your engine's cool, so take pictures and show them to your friends. Now, this is what I don't like. People often come to me and say, with a diagnosis and ask me to confirm it, and that's kind of what you're asking me to do here with the minor transmission problems. So yes and no. I mean, engine coolant temperature is important to the operation of the vehicle, period, as a whole. The computer takes a look at that temperature and makes a whole bunch of decisions based on that engine temperature. So it can affect things like transmission shifting. But there are a lot of other things that can affect transmission shifting. So you have to take that into account. So if you have codes for different things, address those codes first. If you have problems, then you have to address those problems. And I usually start with what the computer is saying, because many times the computer will see something and give you a clue as to what system to look into. So if you have a code for an engine coolant temperature sensor, then pursue that code, find out if that's the case, and if it's a sensor, connector, wiring problem, or some issue with the computer. Once you've got that sorted, then see if your transmission issue is still there. But like I said, don't start with a diagnosis. I mean, yeah, it's okay to have theories and hypotheses, but ask more questions than make assumptions, is what I try and do. Let's see. Michael Lieberstein. Ha, I got that one. Hey, Eric, I hope you've had an awesome beginning to 2016. Actually, it's been pretty cool, and I hope yours has too. A 1998 Dodge Dakota 5.2 liter 4x4. Just recently, with the somewhat cold weather down here in Florida, I've had an issue with my truck starting. When I turn the key, it will start turning over, but very slowly, almost like it's not getting enough power. It will then start to speed up and eventually start, but will die out if I don't hold the gas down for a minute or so, and then it will idle fine. It seems to get easier to start the more I drive in a day. But after parking it and coming back the next day, same thing. On the rare occasion, it will also make the classic dead battery starter click, then will slowly turn over. Now that I've written a book, thanks for your help, and stay dirty. Michael, I think you kind of answered your question, and that is the first thing I would check is your battery. If your battery is low, it will exhibit all those symptoms that you describe, and it will also affect other systems on the vehicle. And as far as if you have an electrical issue, especially one with the starting system, always start with the battery. The battery is the alpha and the omega of the electrical system. If you don't have a good battery in the vehicle, all the other systems are affected, especially on luxury vehicles or newer vehicles that use a lot of electronics. Electronics are very specific about the voltage they get. If they don't get the proper voltage or they get inconsistent voltage, boy, did they act up. And it's amazing what a good battery will do for a vehicle. So I would test your battery. Also check the connections. Connections as they get older, particularly in a humid place such as Florida, there's corrosion and things that happen at those battery terminals. So you can have a good battery, but if there's corrosion in between where the connection of the battery cable is to the battery terminal, then that can cause enough resistance to make it so that not enough electricity passes into the system, particularly when you're asking it to give it all of its amps when you're turning the key to start the vehicle. So start with the battery on that one. is what I would recommend. Adam the Car Guy, hey, I didn't mess that up, has a 72 Ford Pinto he bought 3 weeks ago and did some modifications to the exhaust pipe and the fuel tank to avoid explosion in the rear. And I moved it into my garage. Everything is tight and snug. I did everything right. And I hear the screeching noise when I went to reverse to back the Pinto into my garage. Do you know what that screeching noise is? No, I don't. I'm not there. I don't know what modifications you did. I don't know any of this stuff. But I do have a video on tracking down noises that might be helpful to you. I also wrote an article on tracking down noises that might be helpful to you. Both of those things will be linked down in the description, and you can probably take that to the next step. But any number of things. I mean, it's a 72. It's almost as old as me. And I make noises when I back up sometimes too. Ross W. Hello, my favorite mechanic. Hello, my favorite fan here tonight on tonight's show. I'm back with a 2006 Hyundai Tiburon GS, where a few months ago I asked you about an intermittent O2 sensor code and burning engine oil. I changed to non-synthetic oil, used the brand the service manual recommended, and changed the O2 sensor. It stopped burning oil, but I'm still getting the intermittent O2 sensor code, and I don't know where to go from here. Help is greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. Well, I'm glad to hear that the oil helps solve one problem. However, you didn't list the code that you have for the O2 sensor. And I've got to tell you, that's important because there are probably about 12 codes for O2 sensors, and probably 10 of those don't involve replacing the O2 sensor. They involve some other issue, like maybe it's running lean, maybe it's running rich, maybe the heater's not working, and maybe there's a problem in the wiring. It's good to start with a code. So perhaps if you come back at the next show on the 3rd, I would suggest posting the code that you have for the O2 sensor. I could possibly help you. But right now, just asking me to tell you why an intermittent O2 sensor code is coming up when you just replaced the O2 sensor, honestly, I can't do much for that. So sorry about that, but thanks for the comments and thanks for your question. February, I can pronounce that one too. That's 2 in a row. Hey, Eric, 99 Accord V6 today on 170,000 miles. Power steering isn't as helpful as I would like it to be, if you know what I mean. The fluid hasn't been changed in 13 years, so I finally decided to tackle it. Bought genuine Honda fluid, ran clean fluid through to flush the system, refilled to the proper mark, nothing changed. The steering feel is the same. It feels like I have manual steering sometimes, especially first start in the morning at 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, if I try to quickly turn left or right, the steering becomes very stiff and almost locks up. If I turn gently, all is fine. What could be wrong? We're not pump, please not the rack. Thanks for your answer. Well, everybody hopes for the pump in those situations. Hopes for the pump. But my experience, 9 times out of 10, it is the rack itself. However, 99, I'm trying to think of 99 if they had changed. Honda used to use a mechanical sensor attached to the speed sensor on some vehicles that would disable the power steering, because power steering is only useful when you're trying to park the car. It's completely useless when you're driving down the highway. In fact, you don't want power steering to be active when you're driving down the highway. It will make it so that the slightest movement you make will cause the car to go all over the place. You get much better road feel if you don't have power steering as you're driving down the road. But it's really great when you're trying to spin the wheel to parallel park. So that's where power steering mostly comes in. And as I said, Honda used to use a mechanical type of power steering sensor. It was a power steering speed sensor to tell whether or not the vehicle is moving. And if the vehicle is moving quickly down the road, it canceled out the pressure to the power steering rack. But when there was no load on the system, then it would allow the pressure to pass through and go to the rack for the assist. So perhaps if you have one of those hydraulic ones, and I'm not sure, 99 is one of those transitional years when things started happening. If you have one of those, a hydraulic one, then you might start with that, and that may help. And you know what, I would look in salvage, because I don't think you're going to find one in the aftermarket, and I think if you actually buy one, it might be pretty expensive. So check to see what you can find salvage wise as far as that part goes, if it applies to your vehicle. If it doesn't apply to your vehicle, you probably need a power steering rack. Like I said, it's hardly ever the pump that's the problem. Pumps make noise, but they don't often cause power steering not to work. It's usually the component, such as the steering box or steering gear. That's been my experience. Adam the Car Guy, let's see. Wait a second. Yeah, Adam the Car Guy again has a 94 Vigor LS. Warmed it up yesterday and heard a sizzling, bubbling noise in the radiator area, even though I already put antifreeze and coolant in this winter. Can you tell me what this could be? Hondas of that vintage are famous for cracking the top tanks of the radiator. And I would say that if you have a coolant leak in that area, that's probably what it is. And in fact, it cracks at the very top and sometimes near the cap itself, or maybe the cap isn't sealing. That's what I'd be looking for. I already answered one of your other questions, so moving on. Lissy Yanni has a 97 Acura 2.2 that has been sitting for a year, and he fixed the brakes and bottom ball joints and haven't changed the oil yet. It's still full, but do you think it could have some water in it? I'm going to change it ASAP, but upstate New York is so cold working outside. I know, I was born around Buffalo, so I'm very familiar with how cold winters get around that area. Okay, if it's been sitting for a year, I recommend changing the oil. Have the oil changed. Maybe wait for a warm day, or some places, depending upon where you live. Usually, major metropolitan areas have this. They have facilities to where you can go and rent a garage for a period of time. If not, save up and have somebody change the oil for you if you're not able to do it yourself. Honestly, by the time you get done buying a filter and buying all the oil, it almost comes out to the same amount of what you get at a quick lube place. You just have to watch them swapping out your drain plug for one that could strip out your oil pan. That's something I've found to have issues with. It's some quick lube places. Some places are responsible, some places not so much, because, like I said, they sell oil changes really cheap, but almost cheaper than doing it yourself. Just throwing that out there. All right, you've got a couple of other questions here, but I'm going to move on to somebody else's questions. Leventis 19, hi Eric, 2008 Mazda 6, rate front power window, replaced window motor, master power switch, check fuses, still nothing. No motor noise, just silence. Window regulator is good, all well. Any suggestions on what I should do next? Also did the window reset procedure. That's in the owner's manual. Any leads here? Thank you. Well, okay, well, you've replaced the components, so I guess we can assume that those components are good, but you got to check to see if they're getting power. Usually with power windows, in fact, I did a video on this very thing. And what I did was I went to the window motor itself, and I checked to see if it had power and ground when I activated the switch. And I knew at that point that I had I didn't, I think. Yeah, I ended up replacing the switch on that one, but I didn't have that switching on that particular window, and I knew that the switch was faulty. But you have to check to see if I usually start at the component, and then I work my way back. So if I don't have power and ground going to the window motor, then I work my way back to, say, maybe, and that in your case, there may be a control unit, there may be a communication error, there may be a digital communication error between like a body control unit and something else. Maybe it's receiving a signal from the switch, maybe it's not. In your case, a scan tool might be how you go about the diagnosis. And that's where the rabbit hole starts to get really deep. So the first thing to do, I think, is, as I suggested earlier, find yourself a wiring diagram for the circuit. Find out how the circuit is supposed to work, and then study it and find out if it is working as it's intended. Electrical diagnosis is not something you really shotgun. Electrical diagnosis is you take measurements and you make observations and you draw conclusions based on that. Sometimes you get away with replacing components and everything works fine. And, a lot of us get away with that for a very long time. But every once in a while, you run into something like this, and it's a pinched wire somewhere, maybe inside the door, where it moves back and forth, where it connects to the body. That happens on occasion also. But I'm not going to say that that's your problem, because I don't know. If it were me, I'd be grabbing a wiring diagram and see if I could find how the circuit worked, and to see if it was working as it's supposed to, as it's intended. Nathan Wedrick. 2000 Dodge Stratus 2-liter auto trans that seems to have a misfire when the engine is cold. When I start the car and it's cold, it runs normal and idles correctly, but it will sound like it tries to die for about a quarter second, and the RPMs drop off of that quarter second, and then it picks right back up to normal. It will do this intermittently until about halfway to normal operating temperature. When in gear, this issue seems to go away. It will also occasionally have a high idle, 1200 to 1300, when I put it in park after driving. I replaced the map sensor last July because it was cutting out while driving down the road, or die when I was in idle or park. That fixed the issue at that time. Based on your description, it sounds like the idle air control valve might be having an issue. Some people have some luck cleaning those, and some people, I often replace them But as I said, sometimes people have luck cleaning them. But it could be that it's not being told where to be. It could be like maybe coolant temperature sensor issues, something of that nature. See if you have any check engine light codes. If you have any codes for that idle air control valve, I might be looking into it. One test that I do, super scientific, I take the handle of a screwdriver while the engine's running and I just smack the idle air control valve. And if the idle starts to change when I do this, then I really begin to suspect it. I also check the electrical connections and make sure that those are connected and there aren't any issues there. So yeah, I'd be, my prime suspect based on your description would be that idle air control valve, but I think that's also, well, you said you have a MAF sensor, but it may also have a MAF sensor, a mass airflow sensor, and make sure there are no holes in the tube that goes from that sensor to the engine. If there are, then it's quite possible that that could be causing that issue and causing false readings. I just realized we're a little past the half-hour mark. This is where I jump to answer other people's questions who just jumped in. Okay. All right. Adam Jamahui, hey Eric, Suzuki Renault 06 recently had a loose timing belt, changed it. Now I have continuous cranking sound. Don't alternate. I'm pretty sure that the crankshaft isn't moving. I'm wondering if you've ever seen an OK starter motor that doesn't engage with the crankshaft. The gear thing doesn't move out to come into contact with the crankshaft. Is it very common? How would you go about troubleshooting it? And thank you very much for all your help and the information. Okay, you just changed the timing belt and now you have a continuous cranking sound. Okay. So you just changed the timing belt and you're trying to start the vehicle and it's not starting. That's what I'm getting from what I'm reading there. If that's the case, go back, check your work, and hope you did it right. Because if you got it on time, there will be no compression and it will continuously crank. So in other words, the starter will engage. You didn't do anything with the starter, so it shouldn't have anything to do with the starter. Go back to what you just did. As I mentioned earlier, you're the prime suspect. If you go in and you change something and alter something and something that did work before doesn't work now, you're the primary suspect. Just leave your ego at the door and try to work the problem. So in your case, since you just did a timing belt, I'd be checking those timing marks and making sure they're dead on, because if they're not, then as I said, you could be losing compression. If you're losing compression, then it'll never start. And you know, engine mechanical is one of those big things. All right, getting random here. TV Buster, a name I can read, has a 2008 Subaru WRX, and actually it's my fault for not being able to read names, not yours for having the names. I replaced the exhaust from the turbo to the catback and reflashed the ECU with a Stage 2 program made by Cobb. So far it's running great with no problems, but I have 125,000 miles, and I'm wondering, in your opinion, on whether I should take it back to stock, if you have an opinion on aftermarket modifications such as these. Thanks, really appreciate your advice. Okay, well, really, what are you doing with it? Have you got another car? Have you, is this something you can have a little fun with until it dies? Maybe it won't die, who knows? I do modifications. I like modifications. Modifications are fun if they're done right. They're not fun if somebody did them wrong and then brings it to me to fix it, because then I have to figure out how they're modified, how it's supposed to work. That's not fun. But modifying them myself and doing that stuff, yeah, that is a lot of fun. But, if you got a spare car to drive, and if you blow this one up in the process of, putting 20 pounds of boost in it, then hey, you had fun until it died. You found the limit. But have fun with it. I mean, it's your car, and let's try to enjoy them while we can. I mean, gas prices are cheap right now. Might as well enjoy it while we can, because we all know it ain't going to stay that way. All right, let's see. Sal Melchor, hey, Eric, has a 94 Accord EX. When I hit 60 miles per hour, the car starts to shake. What could be causing this? Could it be the ball joints? No. And I've gone round and round. I just recently posted a video about alignments, and I said in that video, loose suspension parts aren't going to cause vibrations. And let me put it this way: if you've got vibrations caused by loose or bent suspension parts, you have really big problems beyond just an alignment. Just saying. But my point is loose suspension parts like that don't cause vibrations. It's rotating assemblies that cause vibrations, meaning axles, tires, wheels, that type of thing. Spinning things, to make it simple, cause vibrations. And at that speed, that says tire balance to me, like right out of the box. So I would get your tire balance checked to see if that solves the problem. And if not, it's 94. Inner CV joints often cause problems, but the inner CV joint problems are an intermittent vibration, and it usually happens at higher speed than 60, like around 70-ish, and you can drive out of it, so it depends on how you turn. So if you turn one way and the vibration goes away, and you turn another way and it then becomes more prevalent, that is almost always an inner CV joint problem. And a lot of people made that suggestion when I posted my ETCG1 video about my 2012 Odyssey having a very, very slight vibration. Yeah, I get it. Axles can cause those kinds of vibrations, but not at 47,000 miles. Never seen that. Anyway, yeah, check tire balance. Taylor W has a 2007 Honda Civic with a power steering issue. Sometimes it feels like it's going out and it starts a groaning noise. The fluid level is topped off. I was wondering if there's any way to diagnose if the pump is bad. See, I told you, everybody hopes for the pump. Actually, with a 2007 Civic, I would be looking at the O-ring on the inlet to the pump, because if it's sucking in air. So, well, actually, first I should say, take off the cap for the power steering fluid after the vehicle's been running for a while. If you see a bunch of bubbles down there, you got air in the system. That can cause that groaning noise and make power steering difficult. Air is compressible. Liquids are not. Liquids are what you need to make the power steering work. Air is not. So if you've got air in the power steering system, it's not going to work correctly. If you do, replace the O-ring. There's the hose that goes from that reservoir to the power steering pump, the big fat one, not the one with the bolt, the one with the hose clamp. On the inside of that elbow, there's an O-ring. That O-ring gets old and it can suck air in right there. I would replace that O-ring. Don't cover it with RTV. Just replace that O-ring, stick it back on there, run it for a while, put Honda fluid only in that system and see if that helps. If it doesn't help, then you're probably looking at a rack, not a pump, a rack. Let's see, Kevin Mayhew, 75 AMG 232 straight 6, either needs a rebuild or a replacement on the cylinder head. What? I'm not sure. As it is so old, high mileage. If I should be replacing the rods or using the original ones with rebuilt heads, as I imagine the original arms would be worn a bit, and matching the crankshaft. You know, this is what I would recommend you do. And AMC, you haven't done any favors by getting an AMC. they're hard to find parts for, because AMC did a lot of stuff with a lot of different companies, and you're almost never sure what you'll find under the hood. I'll say this: anytime you're looking for parts, have your VIN number handy. That said, as far as the engine, get to be friends with your local machinist. That's what you want to do. In fact, I'm going to go over this when I build the Fairmont engine. In fact, I found a local machinist who is going to help me out. Very much looking forward to working with him on the whole thing. He's got dynos, both chassis and engine. I'm going to try to have some fun with this guy. Anyway, get to be friends with your machinist. They know engines. They know machining. They know these things, and they would know probably a lot more about your engine than I do, and be able to help guide you in the direction. They would say, these years connecting rods are junk. Get rid of those. Put these pistons in. Those guys. That's what they do. So when you're asking questions, particularly on older cars, try to find an expert. Machinist would be your friend. All right, I'll do one more. Kevin McClutchian. Hey, Eric, my friend has a 2003 ML350 and has a metallic noise, almost like a piece of metal banging in rhythm with the speed, not RPM. That goes by speed. So, okay, so it's not an engine noise. It sounds like right from the middle of the front of the car. Could this be a sign of front differential going bad? What are the symptoms of a failing front differential? It could be, because you're on the right track by picking up on the fact that it's speed sensitive, not RPM sensitive. So it's not an issue with the engine necessarily. So it's speed related, but there are several things to look at here. Differential is one of them. It could be, but the first place I would be looking is maybe at the brakes and the wheels, and also, believe it or not, tires. I've seen tires cause some really strange noises. And to check those, simply just rotate the tires front to back. Like, put the front tires in the back, put the back tires on the front, see what you get. And a lot of times that can point you in the right direction. So tracking down noises, once again, I have an article that has videos and everything that'll be linked in the description that will be helpful to you. That I believe will be helpful to you in tracking that down. But yeah, you know, as far as the differential, check the fluid and see if there's a bunch of metal in it. That's a good indicator. There's usually some fluid inside differentials, like when you change the fluid, because nobody ever changes differential fluid. But that said, if there's like copious amounts of metal in there, then yeah, that could be a pretty good indication that something has gone amiss. Should I do one more? Christopher. Hey, wait, Christopher Malatis. Can gas with more additives, say winter additive and cleaning additives, etc., make your car run bad or even reduce performance? Thanks for making these awesome videos. Man, I shouldn't have read that question because, all right. There are actually two types of fuel. There is winter fuel and summer fuel. Right now, we're at least in the northern hemisphere. We're in the winter fuel season. So there are different blends, and you can't get around this. As far as it making your car run bad or hampering performance, no, I don't think so. But yeah, they already have all that stuff. And I've actually gone to these fuel plants. I've actually seen where they engineer fuels. I've been in the lab, and I've got to say the people that are there, they're not trying to screw you over. They really aren't. They've put a lot of thought in what they do. In fact, they don't even speak in a human language most times. They speak in terms of carbon chains and all these other things that go together to create combustible fluids. but seriously, no. But there is a winter blend and a summer blend gasoline. We'll leave it at that because I don't want to get too long and drawn out for all that stuff. Anyhow, I'm going to conclude the show here, wrap it up. Give me a few minutes to get those links and things I mentioned down in the description if you're just watching it now. So I need a few minutes to do that. Once again, if I did not get to your question, first, I'd like to apologize, but I will have another show on February 3rd. I do these every 2 weeks. Normally do these every 2 weeks at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. So if I didn't get to your question, yeah, apologies for that. Also, if you're posting to YouTube, I won't be answering those questions, so apologies for that. But there is always EricTheCarGuy.com available for you. Once again, with the stuff that I mentioned at the beginning of the program, there to help you with automotive questions all the time, not just every other couple of weeks or every couple of weeks. I probably should have said it that way. Anyway, if you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, Facebook, Twitter, also Instagram. Close each of my videos, including these live shows. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. And I want to personally thank you for watching.